The open public meeting law requires that anyone recording this meeting please identify themselves, and also that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. Is there anyone else here recording this? Please identify yourself. Okay. The first item on the agenda is request authorization for the approval of the minutes of August 15th, 2019. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Item number 2, request authorization to extend the license agreement with the Massachusetts Port Authority for the continued use of approximately 33,417 square feet of land on parcel C2 within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Parcel C2 is a 65,000 square foot parcel located adjacent to the Flynn Cruise Terminal in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. In 2009, 2013, and again in 2014, BPDA entered into a license agreement with the Massachusetts Port Authority to utilize approximately 50% of the parcel. Massport uses the parcel for vehicle and bus parking to service the cruise port during the active cruise season. BPDA, subsequently, we retain the right to use the balance of the parking lot where we park 88 vehicles. The current license expires in November of this year with a 5-year option term. The license states that rent for the option term will be based on the market rate for industrial land in South Boston. Massport has timely exercised the option and has agreed to BPDA staff that the market rate for the undeveloped industrial land is $3 per square foot per year. Accordingly, we're proposing a rental fee of $100,251 for the 2020 cruise season. That represents a 90% increase over the 2019 rate. And that rate will increase by 4% annually through 2024.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Dennis. Item number 3, request authorization to execute a lease agreement with Massa, Iraq, and Afghanistan Fallen Heroes Memorial Fund for use of 7,131 square feet of their principal office and incubator space for veteran entrepreneurs at 12 Channel Street, number 603, within the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mass Fallen Heroes is a locally funded 501c3 not-for-profit organization. They were formed to assist the families of military who made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq and Afghanistan. They also provide counseling, assistance, and advocacy for military personnel. WS Development has agreed to provide Mass Fallen Heroes with low-cost office space and a proposed development in the seaport near the impressive Mass Fallen Heroes Memorial on Northern Avenue. We have 100% confidence that WS Development will honor that commitment. However, the deliverable is 3 to 5 years away. In the meantime, Mass Fallen Heroes is in need of an affordable office warehouse space, preferably in the vicinity of their memorial. In July of 2019, the board approved the lease of unimproved space at 22 Dry Dock Avenue in the Raymond Flynn Marine Park for Mass Fallen Heroes. Mass Fallen Heroes had procured several trades and construction companies to donate time and energy to build out the space for them. We're basically requesting to honor our commitment to Mass Fallen Heroes, only to move their address to 12 Channel Street rather than 22 Dry Dock Avenue. Although no plans are imminent, 22 Dry Dock is in the epicenter of the over 1 million square feet of research and development under construction or proposed in the Marine Park. And we want to retain our options for that site, not that anything is pending. We're proposing to move them to a vacant 7,000 square foot warehouse space on the 6th floor of 12 Channel Street, which they have agreed and looking forward to doing pending your approval. The space is usable but difficult to demand top dollar for without BPDA expending over $100,000 in improvements before we can go to market. Mass Fallen Heroes is currently procuring donated improvements and construction work for this space, which will include new air conditioning, new windows, completely built-out office, and a lot of improvements to the warehouse portion. We're proposing a 5-year lease for the space in its as-is condition. The fee will be a nominal $3,000 per month plus expenses and electricity. However, BPDA will benefit from donated improvements estimated to be over $1 million in market value, which we will then be able to bring to market when Mass Fallen Heroes moves to the WS development space.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Item number 4, request authorization to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Massachusetts Port Authority concerning cost sharing for the roadway improvement project in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. Devin.
Director, Madam Secretary, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. For the record, I'm Devin Quirk, Director of Real Estate. I'm here today to discuss Black Falcon Avenue, which is the roadway between the Innovation and Design Building and the Flynn Cruise Terminal in the Marine Park. BPDA owns the Innovation and Design Building, while Black Falcon Avenue, while Massport owns the cruise terminal. When cruise ships are in port, Massport depends on Black Falcon Avenue as the exclusive roadway access to the port. Therefore, Massport is very vested in the condition and design of the roadway. The board approved a capital construction project to resurface and improve Black Falcon Avenue, which was budgeted at approximately $1.8 million. Massport recently approached BPDA staff regarding making strategic changes to the design of this project to improve cruise port operations. In return for those changes, Massport has offered to cover 1/3 of the full cost of the project, including any change orders. Therefore, staff requests the board's permission to enter into a memorandum of agreement with Massport to memorialize Massport's commitment to pay for this third of all these overall costs for the Black Falcon roadway design and improvement project. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Devin. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Devin. Item number 5, request authorization to advertise and issue a joint request for proposals for parking management services for Boston Redevelopment Authority and the Economic Development Industrial Corporation for parking facilities for a 2-year term with 3 one-year options. Megan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director, and Madam Secretary. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I'm Megan Rohr, and I'm in my 9th week as the first Harvard Leadership Fellow to serve with the BPDA team. I could not be more excited for my year-long fellowship, and the work and the camaraderie have already far exceeded my expectations. I'm here today to request your approval to advertise and issue a joint request for proposals for the parking management service for the EDIC parking facilities, as well as the BRA parking facilities. To ensure efficient operations, we are seeking one vendor to manage both the 5 EDIC-owned parking assets and the 4 BRA-owned parking assets. These facilities have been deliberately managed under one parking management company for the past 3 years, and through this RFP, we'll select the best partner for the next 2 to 5 years. The RFP process will enable us to select the most qualified, innovative, and financially rigorous parking management firm. Therefore, I request your authorization for the clerk to advertise and issue a joint request for proposals for parking management services for EDIC parking facilities and the BRA parking facilities. The awarded contract will have a term of 2 years with 3 one-year options that may be exercised at the sole discretion of the BPDA. The EDIC's costs related to this parking management are not to exceed $310,000.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? You did such a good job your first time out, there's no question.
Thank you, sir. Not nervous at all.
Hearing no questions, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck. Item number 6, request authorization to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston Department of Public Works for use of fuel services provided by Fleet Maintenance Unit. John.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Director, members of the board. The City of Boston Department of Public Works owns and operates a fleet maintenance unit. In many previous years, we've always allowed our fleet to be serviced by this. This is just a memorandum of agreement to continue those services.
Great. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Item number 7, request authorization to execute any and all documents necessary for the purchase of 275 new personal computers from HIQ Inc. in an amount not to exceed $191,125. Michael.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, Madam Secretary. The majority of the BPDA computers are roughly 5 years old and are nearing the end of their life expectancy. The purchase of the new computers will not only provide the staff with the latest technology and computing power, but ensure that all staff will be running Windows 10. This is important as Windows 7 will no longer be supported by Microsoft come mid-January 2020.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Michael. I need a motion to adjourn the EDIC meeting.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Item 8.
Oh, it's on the back.
Double-sided.
There's never, this is the first time that's ever happened. Number 8, request authorization to enter into a consultant services contract with Gardner Inc. for independent research services in an amount not to exceed $95,354. Michael.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. As the agency continues to execute on its strategic goals and initiatives, it is important to do so with a high degree of efficiency and effectiveness. As you know, the IT department supports all the various work of the BPDA and has identified a need for additional guidance and support to ensure that the BPDA keeps pace with rapid changes in technology. Utilizing the service will contribute to our ongoing success by providing access to valuable independent research that will strengthen our decisions in technology solutions. This service will also provide access to subject matter experts that have a deep experience and knowledge of various software categories that the BPDA is considering. The BPDA will also be able to address common challenges with best practice templates, step-by-step work plans, and maturity diagnostics by functional areas.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Item number 9, personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, and Director Golden. I'm Siobhan Feeney of Human Resources, and we have some personnel items for your consideration on the EDIC agenda this afternoon. We have 2 appointments with further details listed for your review in the board memo. First is Manuel Escobar. He'll be Senior Infrastructure and Energy Planner in the Planning Department. And number 2 is Renise Kimbrell, Asset Building Coordinator in OWD. We have 1 employment service contractor with details listed in the board memo for your review and consideration, Calpurnia Roberts of OWD. We have 3 travel items for your consideration with details listed in the board memos. Number 1 is Katie Gall of the Office of Workforce Development. Number 2 is Constance Martin, Office of Workforce Development. And number 3 is Corey Zengabot of the Planning Department. And finally, we have 2 departures with details listed in the board memo. Number 1 is John Lynch of the Real Estate Department, and number 2 is Victoria Phillips of the Planning Department. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Siobhan. Are there any questions on the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And now item number 10, a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn the EDIC meeting.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Okay. Just give me 1 second here. This goes here. Okay. The open public meeting law requires that anyone recording this meeting identify themselves and that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. Is there anyone else here that's recording this, or please identify yourself? Okay. Before I get on to the BRA meeting, we have some elected officials that want to have some input into a couple of the items that are on the agenda, and because of their schedules, and there's so many of them, I'm just going to call them up first and let them share now, if you prefer, or you can wait until the item's on the agenda, and we'll just include your comments into the minutes. So, City Council Flaherty, would you like to go first?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and Director Golden.
I guess I'm here, it's kind of a conundrum that I stand before you. We have Article 68, let me just rewind. South Boston went through extensive zoning and rezoning for over a period of 2 years, might have been closer to 3 years, and there was a couple sort of fatal flaws, if you will, in that zoning that was allowing for those single and two-family homes that were on large size lots to basically be bulldozed. And so from the outcry of the community, working with my colleagues in government, I had asked the mayor at the time, Mayor Walsh, to insert an iPod, which is the interim planning overlay district, just as a way to sort of be able to kind of catch some of that. And he was very gracious, and as a result, we have an iPod that currently is now overseeing all of the zoning in South Boston. And it catches now everything, which is, it's a double-edged sword. So for folks that are doing some interior stuff that might be a little on the extensive side, they get caught up in it, versus folks that are doing larger scale projects, they're in it as well. And then, knowing the full time that it's interim, meaning it's temporary. And so he was also kind enough to work with our local electeds in the community to extend it. And so it's coming up for expiration on October the 31st, and therein lies the conundrum. It's kind of like getting a half a loaf, and the community wants the whole loaf. And we had a community meeting just this week and one last week. So from an optics standpoint, it doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in the community, feeling that sort of the cake is baked and the fix is in. All that stuff is what you're hearing at the community meetings, because we're having a vote so close to when the last community meeting is. That said, I know that if we don't take action, then because of the statutory requirements and because the iPod is expiring, the community loses those protections. And again, therein lies the conundrum. So, throwing it really to the wisdom of the board, I wanted to frame this for my other South Boston colleagues who will be joining me at this podium to sort of try to figure out what it is. And I think the answer is that the minimum lot size that has been requested through the community process has been inserted, which is a really good thing. The community also is asking that MFR, which is the multifamily residential, be replaced with a 3F, like a lot of the other neighborhoods in the community in the city of Boston have. So, and that's not included. And so therein, again, lies that big dilemma, is that we're here on behalf of the community. We want to protect the community. We want to recognize that the mayor and the BRA, working with the community, inserted the interim iPod overlay for very necessary protections as a result of some flaws that were in Article 68. I think that some of those flaws have been addressed in what's in front of you, but there still remains a big one, which is the 3F that's out. So it's, again, we're here, and if you're against it, then, and you know that the iPod is expiring, then you're leaving the community with no protections. I don't want to do that, but at the same token, we want the community protected, but we also want to protect it to the fullest extent, and it's probably one neighborhood out of the entire city that arguably has gone through a significant period of development over the course of probably close to 20 years, at least since I've been on the council in 2000, and some argue is even overdeveloped. And you see it every morning. You get 70, 80, 100 people at the bus stop, bus after bus after bus going by them, jam full. There's nowhere for them to go. We're kind of busting at the seams. And so we had a community meeting with very little notice, and over 250 people showed up the other night. And their main concern was clearly they wanted minimum lot size. They did ask, and I'll say this on behalf of the community, given what we've sort of been seeing in the news and reading in the papers, they asked that no action be taken and that the iPod be extended indefinitely until those issues are ironed out. And I think that was really more on the optics piece. And then on top of that, they wanted 3F inserted in replace of multifamily residential. So I don't pretend to be a zoning expert. I don't pretend to be sort of an architect or an engineer, but I'm bringing to you what the community brought to us the other night in a community meeting. And the community felt that at the end of that meeting that there were going to be subsequent meetings, or at the very least there was going to be a further discussion on 3F, and then they learned that the vote was this evening. And so needless to say, they're very outraged. Our phones and emails have been going bonkers for the last 48 hours. So I'm here again on behalf of the community. Again, real tough decision here. If you support it, you're giving us some protection because the iPod is expiring, but it's not the full protection that the community wants. And so with that, I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the board, just to present that conundrum that Article 68 has now caused the community. Again, thank the mayor and Brian Golden from the BRA for inserting the interim iPod overlay. They didn't have to do that. It was a request that I made on behalf of the community to protect the community at a time because of those inherent flaws. Some of them have been addressed in what's in front of you, but all of them haven't, and there it is. So, and I'll defer to my colleagues to maybe kind of drive in on those points.
Okay, well, thank you very much for
much.
coming
Thank
tonight.
you.
Appreciate it. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the board. I think Councilor Flaherty said it best. I won't restate what he said, but the residents of South Boston would like to see 3F included. We had a community meeting the other night, and almost everybody there wanted to see 3F. It was a way to protect the neighborhood. Again, want to say thank you to for Mayor Walsh for giving us the iPod at the beginning, and also to Director Golden as well for his leadership. But I think it's important for the residents of South Boston to continue this discussion. They want 3F. They think it will protect the neighborhood. I agree with them. And we also have, Mr. Chairman, a letter from the South Boston elected officials, basically just highlighting what Councilor Flaherty said. With your permission, could I hand it to the board?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Or you can give it to the secretary, and they'll...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the board.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate your comments. Senator Collins, would you like to...
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, Madam Secretary, Director Golden. Thank you for taking me out of turn. I also want to thank some members of the team that worked on this. I know Mark McGonigal's here, as well as Eddie McGuire for their work on this issue. I've also co-signed the letter that was submitted by Councilor Flynn. Councilor Flynn and Flaherty gave you a kind of a good background as the issue is developed before us today. The plan before you was developed over the course of many months of work, adjusting the FAR, the height, lot size restrictions, with the FAR being increased more than most of the housing stock today. We expect to see some changes because of that. Height being moved from 50 feet down to 40, though most of the buildings in South Boston community are 35 feet. So we'll be giving folks an extra 5 feet of height. And though it's a height reduction from the current plan, I think you'll hear from the BRA that the officials that the H-150 designation was out of compliance with the existing housing stock. And this is a planned community, unlike the former tenement communities of the North End and the South End that may be used as examples here. You can't get more of a planned community than a street grid that's A to P and 1 to 9. And all the housing largely in that area is 1 to 3 family. Though I have some questions and concerns about the process that came about the last few weeks, really the biggest issue is this designation of multifamily residential and what that could mean for the future. Some proposals that had really caught the eye of the BRA officials and our city officials after the initial rezoning, lots at 202 M Street being the one that was probably the most discussed. With MFR designation going forward, this single family would be able to be knocked down and built as a multifamily beyond the 3-family, 1 to 3 family houses in that area. Now, some lots are sizable enough where multifamily residential designation makes sense. They're few and far between. So there's enough of them to make that designation, but as across the board, leaving it open for the MFR designation would allow that site and other sites that have been the points of controversy to be developed as of right outside the character and integrity of the community. Now, Mattapan, Dorchester, 2 communities in my district, Jamaica Plain, Charlestown, Brighton, all with those designations today have maintained the character and integrity architecturally and otherwise of those communities with that designation. And we know there's a housing crisis. It's a regional housing crisis. It's a city of Boston housing crisis. And South Boston's aware of that. So the suggestion that we're not interested, whoever may be, whatever circles they may be flowing around in housing, it couldn't be further untrue. This board voted on a plan that calls for 16,000 units of housing between Andrew Square and Broadway Station. And that makes sense. Why? Because it's transit-oriented, it can take on that density. The volume there is different than in residential, particularly at a peninsula, inside the peninsula. Mary Ellen McCormick will be before you soon. 10,000 units of housing. That's 26,000 together units of housing in South Boston. So this isn't an anti-housing position that we're holding. Couldn't be further from the truth. We understand that, and we want to work with the city on this. But I believe, as Councilor Flaherty pointed out, it does come up a little short. And this may be just a philosophical difference, but if this plan goes forward without protection 1 to 3F, again, this isn't something that's come out of left field for us. Other communities have it. We've seen it work. That we could be in the same situation, which was the genesis of this planning effort, where lots that are a little more sizable, that not everyone has a yard in South Boston, but the ones who do, that could easily change. There's a project on Fifth Street right now that's had been, I think there's an appeal on it. They got a garage behind it and a little bit more space than normal, which is, nowadays it's postage stamp to postage stamp. That's going to change. That would change that community's architectural integrity from a 3 to 5 units, and we all know where things have been going with the parking crunch. So I ask that you consider our position on this. We understand that a lot of work has been done, not trying to shortchange any of that, but that we have a opportunity before us to really bring some, I think that's the intention, but we disagree on one piece, that the 1 to 3, the 3F designation would really bring home, and not just optics. I think that's part of it, but and implementation, because when the de facto position is multifamily residential, with the speculation and the development interest, it's always going to be more than 3. At the very least, it'll be more than 3. I know there are dimensional components here, but any lot sizes that can take it on, we have a lot of concern about that. And again, it was this whole planning effort was to prevent situations like that happening, knocking down single-family homes, building 5, 6, 7 units, stuffing people in places that it's really difficult to manage. I mean, we have some hot meetings at times. I saw more veins popping out of people's necks on Monday than I have in a very long time. Property rights are always controversial, but I think people really feel overwhelmed, and we think that the plan, if added, and I think the plan is will have a positive impact, but if added, will bring a lot to bring that temperature down and allow for more reasonable development to take place. So thank you for the time, and I hope you take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Senator. State Rep.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, Director Golden, members of the board. Thank you for taking me out of turn. My name's David Beal. I'm the state representative in South Boston, and I'm here to testify alongside my colleagues, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Flaherty, and Senator Collins. As has been alluded to, the BPDA has had an extensive public process over the last few years regarding zoning in South Boston, and I thank them for their partnership and their willingness to have conversations around zoning. It's a very difficult conversation to have in the city of Boston, and we appreciate their efforts. Most recently, there were multiple meetings this week regarding the future of Article 68, which is the underlying zoning for the majority of South Boston, and has been alluded to for the last 24 hours. My phone and my colleagues' phones, emails have been blowing up with requests to have Article 68 changed to include 3-family zoning and designations in order to protect the fabric and character of our neighborhoods. As has been said here, no 2 parcels are the same. There are some parcels where you can argue multifamily housing should work, and that's the default position of Article 68. However, no 2 parcels are created equally. No 2 neighborhoods are the same. Each has their own unique challenges around development. And also, our 2 families and 3 families, those are the fabric of our communities. That's what makes our neighborhoods great. And we heard loud and clear this past week that our residents want to see those kinds of zoning, that zoning implemented in South Boston in order to maintain the fabric of our neighborhoods and the communities that we love. So I'm here standing with my colleagues to requests, if possible, an extension of the iPod and re-engagement with the BPDA on this conversation. Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming tonight. Okay, so I just want to say thank you to all the elected officials for coming here and participating. We appreciate your comments. They'll be part of the record, and when we have our discussion with the project manager tonight, we'll follow up on your questions and requests. I can assure you of that. Okay. All right, thank you. And I'm going to get on with the meeting now. We're going to go to item number 1, request authorization for the approval of the minutes of August 15, 2019. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 2, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on October 17, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to consider the proposed Northeastern University EXP project as a development impact project. Motion's in order?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. I recuse, okay. Item number 3, request authorization to schedule a public hearing on October 17, 2019 at 5:40 p.m. or at a date and time to be determined by the director to approve the development plan for Planned Development Area Number 118, Rio Grande Dudley Square Development at 2343 through 2345 Washington Street and 11 through 29 Roxbury Street in Roxbury. A motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 4, Board of Appeal. Jeff, are there any changes to the zoning package?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, Secretary Polymaths. 38 petitions have been submitted for your approval to be transmitted to the Board of Appeal for their meetings on October 8th and next Tuesday, the 17th. There have been no changes or updates.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 5, request authorization to adopt a text amendment to the South Boston Neighborhood District, Article 80, with respect to height and density. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burke, Secretary Polymaths, Director Golden, members of the board. I'm Brian Glasscock, Deputy Director for Regulatory Planning and Zoning for the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And I'll try and pick up where the electeds left off and provide a little bit of background, a little bit more history to this. You know, zoning, as you know, is kind of a dull tool sometimes. It's an iterative process. And I don't know if that's going to go for me. It's working. Thank you. So outreach on this actually began almost 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. We were noticing that quite a lot of development projects were going to the Zoning Board of Appeal on a regular basis. Things that were identical to things that were already in the neighborhood, and it indicated to us that the zoning didn't match what actually was on the ground. Zoning was more restrictive than what existed in the neighborhood at the time. And it was becoming kind of a challenge. It taxes people's ability to sort of pay attention to these things, and a lot of things were getting caught up at the ZBA that really didn't need to be. So we looked at reducing zoning height because the 50-foot zoning height seemed excessive when the mode was much shorter, around 35 to 40 feet. We also looked at what the average floor area was, and the floor area ratio was about 1.92. So we thought, matching that to what's existing made a lot of sense. And then working with the elected officials and community members, we raised the parking ratio from 0.9 spaces up to 1.5 spaces, with an exception for studios and one-bedrooms, because there was concern that available on-street parking had been essentially used up. Problem was that, prior to this, nearly every project was going to the ZBA. we put those zoning changes in place. Okay, next slide. This is the current zoning map. You can see small circles there. Dots are the multifamily residential local service. The rest is multifamily residential. And we watched to see what would happen with those new zoning changes in place. Next slide, please. Neighborhood and the elected officials were still concerned that there were too many as-of-right projects getting by that they were concerned about, and that resulted, at the direction of the mayor and the insistence of the community and electeds, that we put an iPod in place in order to further study sizes and shapes of the parcels that were there, the dimensional limits, what kinds of projects people were proposing, where zoning was still sort of falling down. And remember, as I said, this is an iterative process, trying to make each revision more reflect what the community wanted to see and what met with good planning goals. So the iPod covered any projects over 4 units, and it covered substantial rehabilitations of more than 1,000 square feet. That been in place for over 2 years. We looked at some of the results of that, and there were really very few projects, I think less than 40 projects that were coming in for iPod only. The underlying zoning as it existed was still catching the vast majority of hundreds of development projects that came along. So last slide. So our current proposal is that we continue to use the zoning that we had proposed before, but add in the requirement of minimum lot size, not something that South Boston's had before. In the multifamily residential MFR district, 2,000 square feet for the first unit, 1,000 square feet for each additional unit. So to have a 3-family home would require a minimum 4,000 square feet. If you know South Boston, not that many parcels of 4,000 square feet. So there's very, very few. There are many, in fact, most are probably 2,000 square feet or under. And then the MFR-LS district, it's 5,000 square feet for the first unit with 1,000 square feet for each one after. So again, an MFR-LS, you'd need 5,000 square feet for that first, 2 more, so 7,000 square feet for a 3-family home, which is 7,000 square foot parcel is somewhat of a rarity. So we think that gets at a lot of the community's concerns about large, dense projects on very, very small parcels. And the second piece of it is the height limitation. There was a concern that there was a lot of knockdown of smaller homes, single-family homes, 1.5-story homes, to put up something much larger. And so we borrowed a tool from the North End zoning, which requires that if there's demolition involved, that the height of the new structure can't exceed what was there previously. So that discourages some of that knockdown options that we've seen before. And then finally, the density open space requirement, requiring rear yard extensions that are over 1,000 square feet have to be conditional. And that gets at these extensions that were using up the light and air, as people were concerned about. There were, as was mentioned by the electeds, 2 community meetings, both well attended. I was at the first one at the Condon, and just prior to that meeting, we received the letter requesting that we consider downzoning the MFR and MFRL districts to 3-family. That's not something we'd considered in the past. That's not something I don't think Boston has done historically, is downzone. We think that the proposals that we have in front of you today get at the vast majority of issues that were raised. To go to 3-family zoning and downzone would require considerable study to see what would happen from that. Raises a lot of concerns, as you might imagine. But we think they're not mutually exclusive. We think that this is as we said, this is an iterative process that by going forward with what we proposed, we can fill in the gaps that were identified during that iPod period. available for questions. I've got backed by Mark McGonigal, who was a member of many of the community meetings and has been out doing the yeoman's work, meeting with community groups, neighborhood residents, and the elected officials.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Are there any questions from the board?
I'm curious as to what the underlying thinking is for not extending the iPod.
It's already been extended at least once, and we had done all the work that there was to do. There was really no more new work to be done. We did extend it till October 31st in order to be able to finish this process, have community meetings, and still have time to get in front of the board. But we didn't feel at the time that further extensions were going to yield any new information. We've already had 2.5 years worth of data to look at.
And could you also speak to how it is you think the MFR is going to help maintain the character of the neighborhood in terms of the mix of housing?
Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of pieces to this. It's historically been a multifamily residential neighborhood, and that was the zoning when it was first rezoned, and it acknowledged the fact that there were 1, 2, and 3 family structures, but there are also 4, 5, and 6 family structures. There were first floor retail in the MFR LS with apartments above. So it was really more a matter of how much of the lot area was covered, how big the lots were. And I think the problem that we ran into was that with the MFR-LS zoning, you could buy up 2 or 3 or 4 smaller structures, demolish them, and put up a multifamily structure as long as it met the height and setback requirements and FAR requirements. You could do that, and because there's such a strong financial incentive for people to cash out their single-family home, there was a lot of that going on. But with the height limitation that prevents you from exceeding the height of the demolished structure, that sort of puts a lid on that. The minimum lot size also constrains that, because as you go up, you can see in the MFRLS, you need a 7,000 square foot parcel. So you're going to pay pretty dearly to get 7,000 square feet in order to put a 3-family home on it. So the dimensional limits that we've put in, along with the increased parking requirements, and the FAR of 2, we think has pretty well boxed in from a form based code standpoint, what's possible now. But if somebody does have a larger parcel, we don't want to discourage them from building housing on that. If they've got a parcel that supports it based on the dimensional limits that we've come up with, we think it's appropriate that they move forward in that way.
There seems to be concern around the public process of this current proposal that you're putting forth. Can you talk about what the public process has been for this specific set of ideas?
Sure. The meetings that were mentioned happened this past Monday at the Tynan, the prior Thursday at the Condon, but a lot of the work that led up to this was ongoing for months, I think, as even some of the elected officials had mentioned. So a lot of that was internal conversations, both with us as staff as well as the electeds or their staff, that also involved a meeting about 3 weeks ago, a month, where we invited the local civic groups in to talk about what this proposal will be. And other than that, it's really just been, I've attended civic meetings to talk about how, what trends that we were seeing throughout the time of the iPod. But yes, the official process, the official public meetings were, as was mentioned, just recently, a couple of weeks before. But I know that may seem abnormal, but I just want to make sure it's understood that there were months of conversations leading up to that for these recommendations.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. A motion's in order?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work, gentlemen. Item number 6. Request authorization to adopt a text and map amendments to the Boston Zoning Code Article 42A, Harbor Park District, North End Downtown Waterfront, and Dorchester Bay, Neponset River Waterfront, to conform with the Secretary of Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Matthew A. Beaton's April 30th, 2019 decision to approve the Downtown Waterfront District Municipal Harbor Plan pursuant to 301 CMR 23.
Kennan.
Yep. Thank you. Kennan.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, Secretary Polymaths, Director Golden, and members of the board. As I said, my name's Kennan Ryan. I'm a senior planner in downtown and neighborhood planning. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the zoning amendments to Article 42A. Article 42A, as you can see from the map in the slideshow, extends, it includes the North End Waterfront and the Downtown Waterfront Subdistrict, so effectively the area from North Washington Street down to the Northern Avenue Bridge. This is coming directly out of the municipal harbor planning process, a process that began in 2013 with the Public Realm and Waterfront Activation Plan, which eventually led to the municipal harbor plan. This board actually approved the MHP on March 2nd, 2017, and that approval allowed us to submit it to the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for approval. Secretary Beaton approved the MHP with certain conditions on April 30th, 2018. A part of that decision required that we codify this into zoning to make sure it's consistent with the MHP. And I'd like to point out that there was an extensive public process through all of this. There were over 40 public meetings through the MHP process. There was a secondary public process through the state. And at this point in time, you can see we're kind of highlighted in that zoning bubble. Once the zoning amendment is approved by the Zoning Commission, there will still be an extensive public process in terms of through Article 80 for a few of the parcels located within this area. So I also want to just highlight a few of the improvements that came out of the MHP as a reminder. So there's 58,670 square feet of publicly accessible open space that's been increased through the MHP with $14.4 million towards public improvements. The MHP specifically calls out the New England Aquarium and the Gateway to the Harbor Islands as the primary cultural institutions within this area. And so what you see in the zoning kind of it reflects that. So this process, the zoning amendment process, we began this with a 40-day comment period that began on July 28th and closed on September 4th. As a part of that, we had a public meeting with approximately 50 attendees who attended, and we received 8 comment letters through this process. We held 2 additional open office hours where we could answer questions through that process. Our next steps upon approval from this board is to bring this to petition the Zoning Commission next month. So I just want to walk you through some of the changes to the zoning. So first, let's see. First, we're looking to change the statement of purpose and goals within Article 42A to acknowledge some of the resiliency changes and to promote resilient planning and design that's come through the MHP process and is also part of some of the ongoing planning that we're doing now, which I'll touch on at the end. Next, we reference adding a definition to the MHP as a portion of the general plan for the City of Boston, applicable to the sub-district. So this will effectively be the governing plan for the downtown waterfront sub-district. We are changing the boundaries of the downtown sub-district. So the first is to add Long Wharf within the downtown sub-district, taking it out of the north end, and that's to align with the MHP boundaries. The second is to include the Hook Wharf site within the downtown subdistrict, taking it out of Article 42E, I believe. Next, so this section previously contained specific requirements for the inclusion of affordable housing units in proposed projects. These requirements have been subseded by current city policies. Further, these policies are anticipated to undergo an ongoing process of evolution in response to these changes. Therefore, the specific requirements have been modified or deleted to reflect the insertion of the city's inclusionary development housing policy then in effect. So you'll see there's a little bit of some outdated thought in terms of how affordable housing was addressed. We want to bring that back in line with our current IDP policy and use that as kind of something that's governing for the subdistrict. There's also previously included specific requirements for cultural institutions in the older version of this zoning, and so we're bringing this in line with the thought that future funding would go towards the gateway to the Harbor Islands and to the New England Aquarium as the major cultural institutions as called out in the MHP. In terms of open space requirements, we're realigning this definition to align with the definition of open space per Chapter 91 under state regulations. In terms of the urban design and guidelines, I can never read that. We want to ensure that all projects are reviewed under the MHP requirements, and so all review must take that into account as the governing document. And any resilient design features of the proposed project shall be designed in a manner consistent with other urban design guidelines under Section 42A. So what that means effectively is everything has to be compliant with the MHP, including your resiliency planning. So there's some modifications within the within the waterfront subdistrict. So you can see there are, if you can see my laser pointer, there are these bands of different height zones located going here, and so we have extended one height zone, which is the 55-foot height zone, to encapsulate the Long Wharf parcel, and that's so that the height requirements remain the same as they were when it was in the North End waterfront subdistrict. And we've also added a new height zone, Zone F, which will be set at 175 feet for the hook site. Next, we've made a change that realigns this with some of the waterfront resiliency planning we're doing, where building height is not defined by the ground, but it's defined by the sea level rise design flood elevation. And we wanted to ensure that wherever that is set, that the ground floor is no higher than 5 feet above the design flood elevation. We also want to allow PDAs to be allowed within the subdistrict. That's because we found through other MHPs that PDAs are the best course of kind of controlling the outcome and making sure that it's reviewed in compliance with the MHP. Excuse me. Next, we provided a rooftop addition accommodation, so there's an additional 30 feet allowed on top of existing buildings. This 30 feet can only be used for mechanical spaces, and that's to incentivize the movement of mechanical to the rooftop for future flooding. And we want to make sure that that minimizes shadow impacts in the surrounding area. There's been a few changes to the use regulations as well. The first is really to keep this in alignment with Chapter 91 and making sure that there is an understanding of ground floor uses and that they must be water-dependent uses in facilities of public accommodation, even if the facilities of public accommodation occupy less than 40% of the ground floor. Second, we're allowing for expanded definition of the water-dependent use definition so that it's still in alignment with Chapter 91. In addition, we've added takeout restaurants less than 2,500 square feet under restaurant uses, and that's to accommodate the Hook site, which is an existing use. I also just want to point out there's ongoing planning that's occurring. The first is the Coastal Flood Resiliency Zoning Overlay District, which you will see soon. And there's also the Climate Ready Downtown and North End, and so we've thought a lot about that and making sure that none of this is in conflict with that. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yep. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question, Mr.
Go right ahead.
So I just want to make sure I understand it right. So the 30-foot allowed above the zoning.
Yep.
So that's above and beyond. So let's say it's 200 feet. You're able to go 230 if that is for mechanical.
Correct. So it would be non-occupiable space.
Okay. And the 5 feet, so are we allowing the 5 feet also to be added on top? So you were saying if the first floor could be no higher than 5 feet, I think, from
Right.
grade.
Right. So it would be 5 feet from the design flood elevation. It could be no higher, and that's to make sure that we don't end up with a project where there's a huge gap between the public realm and the existing project, or the first floor.
So I guess my question's the same.
Yeah.
If it's 200 and we're having to raise the first floor, can it go to 205?
So no, because it would be for new projects.
Okay. Because I know after Sandy in New York, they did something similar. If
Right.
you're willing to take all your mechanicals and move it up, they were going to allow you to, I think it was minimum of 2 floors you could add on to the top of your building. So, okay.
Yep. That's not a part of what we're proposing here.
Okay, if there's any further questions? Yeah.
Can you talk about the change in the cultural space requirement?
So let me look at the older version. So the cultural space requirement, do you want to answer that? Sure.
So
Turn over to Rich.
Yeah, thank you. The cultural space requirement from the 1990 Harbor Park Plan is outdated. It was a requirement to encourage civic cultural spaces along the downtown waterfront. But in our engagement effort for downtown, there was feedback from the community and the New England Aquarium that the New England Aquarium should be the cultural anchor for the downtown waterfront. Instead of creating a new cultural institution, that all public benefits should be going to support the New England Aquarium. So that's where that change derived from.
And how many upcoming projects do we see this new iteration applying to? Can you kind of quantify this, make this more real for us by talking about some projects that are coming up that these would apply to?
So this would the zoning change would apply to the Hook Lobster site and the Boston Harbor garage. The numeric changes in the zoning reflects the harbor plan, and in the harbor plan we analyzed those 2 sites for new development and new density. So those 2 projects are specifically entitled through this zoning.
Thank you.
Excuse me, either Rich or Ken, could we just clarify something on the graphic here? I think Mr. Monahan just asked if you wanted to access that additional 30 feet that's permissible for mechanicals, can the entire structure be as high as 200 plus 30 additional feet for a total height of 230?
Yes.
And this graphic is a little confusing. It looks like total building height, including the 30 feet, is 200. When I look at this graphic, and I'm just wondering, is this the graphic that ends up being memorialized? That throws me a little. It looks like the total build-out could be 200 feet, and you're saying it can be 230 feet.
So the maximum height outside of Harbor Garage and Hook is 200 feet for new developments. So that's the cap. The incentive is for buildings that are lower than 200 that could add the 30 feet. I don't think there are buildings at 200 feet that this would be an issue with.
I think I understand that because, again, this graphic looks at additional height for the relocation of mechanical systems, so that indicates you're talking about an older building. Correct? And do you see my problem with the graphic here on the right?
The definition of building height in the downtown is the height of the building to the last unoccupied floor. The definition of building height does not take into account
the mechanicals
that are put on the roof if they do not occupy more than 1/3 of the roof area. So even though you're right, it looks like it's 230 feet to the naked eye and to the diagram. Legally, it's 200.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm a little concerned about if the lay person is looking at that graphic, it's going to throw them off.
I understand.
That graphic doesn't explain what you just explained.
Okay.
So I don't know what we do about that. If there needs to be a footnote, a caveat somewhere that makes that clear.
Okay.
So thank you.
Excuse me, Jeff.
Graphic.
If I could, Mr. Chairman.
Or different graphic.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what I just heard you say, though, I just want to make sure, to the naked eye, it looks like it's 230.
Well,
To the naked eye,
reading this,
it looks
correct.
like 200 to me. Total
Right,
height.
so if somebody were to say, that looks larger than 200 feet, I'm saying
I'm saying it doesn't.
Okay, I agree with you. No, I understand, so that has to be fixed, I get that. What I was trying to explain was the definition of building height, what is included, and what the percentage of that is on top.
I think the third is, I wish it was a little more, because mechanical rooms they're decent size.
Yep.
So a third of the building roof dimension, so, okay, but that's current now, you're saying?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, if there's no further questions, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 7, request authorization to adopt the Coastal Flooding Resiliency Design Guidelines to guide and promote flood protection for the new development and building retrofits, and to administer a future coastal flood resilient zoning overlay district. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Polymaths, Director Golden. One of the primary objectives of the 2016 Climate Ready Boston Climate Preparedness and Resiliency Plan was to promote adapted buildings that will function to limit damage and displacement related to impacts of a changing climate. This really fits within the broader Climate Ready strategy of promoting resiliency at different scales. So we're currently working on district-level shoreline protection infrastructure planning, as well as what can be done at the site and the building scale. To this end, the Climate Ready implementation roadmap called upon the BPDA to update our zoning and develop resiliency design guidelines to ensure development projects are better prepared for future climate risks with a focus on coastal storms and sea level rise. In May of last year, the BPDA, in coordination with the city's Environment Department, submitted a grant proposal to the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for funding to assist in the development of resiliency design guidelines for new construction and building retrofits and recommendations for a flood resiliency zoning overlay. BPDA was awarded $250,000 for this project, and over the past year, we've worked with a consultant team to develop the guidelines and zoning recommendations, which were completed in July of this year to submit to the state as part of their contract and grant requirements. Just to clarify, the specific updates to zoning articles and the framing of the overlay and its implementation are subject to further internal review and will be brought before the board at a later date. With respect to the guidelines, the intent is really to provide a resource for residents, business owners, and developers to translate flood resilient strategies into legible best practices for new construction and retrofit projects. Guidelines will also be referenced as part of the overlay district and to establish consistent standards for the administration of resiliency review by BPDA staff. The document is structured to first assist property owners in better understanding their vulnerability to current and future flood events and other regulatory layers applicable in these zones. The extent of application for the guidelines and overlay would relate to those areas we anticipate to see flood waters with a major storm event, that being a 100-year storm event with 40 inches of sea level rise, which we expect somewhere out around 2070. From the vertical vulnerability standpoint, we're also looking at sea level rise design flood elevation, which we already have represented as part of our sea level rise flood hazard mapping viewer that's available through our current website. A resiliency toolkit is then represented, which presents aspects of building form, building envelope, issues related to site access, and as well as supporting strategies which aren't represented here but include landscaping, building envelope, as well as on-site energy. Each of these strategies are really embellished upon in these spreads within the document, providing descriptions on technical and cost considerations, sustainability co-benefits, applicability to various building types, and these are framed out for each strategy. There's also framing of guidance on urban design, accessibility, and ways to mitigate impacts on the public realm related to changes in elevation between first floor grades and site elevations with surrounding sidewalk, streets, and plazas. The final component of the document is a series of case studies. We looked at some of the primary building typologies within this future flood zone. and really integrated all these strategies within these different building types. This is a spread specific to triple-decker, a type commonly found in Dorchester as well as East Boston. Really frame out existing conditions for each of these, really comprehensive long-term strategies that can be implemented throughout the building. And also importantly, looking at integrated incremental strategies and short-term strategies, sort of less expensive, quicker hits that can be done to advance resiliency in the near term. So that really covers the actual document. We did have a fairly substantial process in the development of the guidelines. We brought together a number of city and state agency staff early on to really gauge their interest and overgo some of the initial findings and thoughts, including staff from Inspectional Services, Neighborhood Development, as well as Landmarks Commission, Disability Commission, Conservation Commission, as well as our own Urban Design and Development Review staff. We also had an advisory committee comprised of staff from Boston Harbor Now, as well as A Better City, and Boston Society of Architects. They were very instrumental and also helped coordinate a series of workshops that brought together practitioners from the design and architectural realm, as well as land use attorneys and development and construction firms as well. Lastly, we held a number of community open houses in each of the affected neighborhoods, really great events that brought in resident stakeholders just to go over vulnerabilities within these neighborhoods, get a sense from them as to the legibility of these guidelines and what the framework was for those, as well as interest, concerns, issues that they have with these types of resiliency upgrades moving forward. So with your vote, we hope to have this document posted on our webpage as part of the Article 37 material for green buildings and resiliency, and also this will be a companion document with the future flood zoning overlay. Happy to address any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. So what, aside from putting this out there and on the web page,
yep,
is there any other plans to kind of market this either to the existing impacted areas? You know, I'm thinking about the different businesses or the condo associations. Just how do we create awareness, right, of these things?
Yeah.
I love this. I mean, it's scary, but I love this document, right? Like, because it is real, tactical things that you can be doing. I think about my place, and makes me want to go to my condo association meeting, and it because it makes a difference on how we invest, right? Like into our shared homes and space. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think initially this is going to be utilized by our urban design staff as projects come in, both for large project review under Article 80 and also sub-Article 80 projects. But I think this material speaks to pamphlets, other information that we can probably disseminate on that type of basis to property owners, neighborhood organizations. So I think that's a great follow-up on this to get the word out, because this is, I think, great information, resources for those interests. And we're going to post this document, but I also think we also need to think about how we're going to have to make this legible through our web page as well, getting these spreads in a format that will work for people through that basis.
Yeah, because I mean, we're all going to need to start building up our reserves, right, to be able to anticipate these,
It's a great thought.
So,
Thanks.
Along that line, are the city and state going to be offering any special financing for property owners to do this kind of retrofitting? Because it's clearly extremely expensive and time-consuming. And
exactly. Yeah, these upgrades can range from hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and obviously it's could be a substantial burden. We've had some initial conversations, there are initial discussions with DND. They've got their homeworks programs and have similar funding programs and initiatives and loans for home improvements, historic home improvements. So we're thinking that could potentially be a model for your single-family, three-family homes that may want to make these types of updates and upgrades. But resources are a key consideration of this, and something we need to be sensitive to, as well as developing the zoning and how this is going to be rolled out and implemented.
Great.
Given the very collaborative way in which this was developed, I would like to see at some point a kind of shared strategic plan for how to follow up on the kinds of requests my fellow board members have made in terms of disseminating this.
Yep.
And really getting it out into the communities in multiple languages, and also into some of the communities that might not appear to be as directly impacted as some of the waterfront communities will be. And then, just as a matter of linguistics, is any thought being given to eliminating reference to 100-year storms, given the increasing frequency
exactly.
which we're experiencing?
I utilize that just because it's been part of the vernacular for so long, and it sort of represents what people think of as a big storm, but really the proper terminology is the 1% chance storm event. So it's a storm event with a probability of 1% occurring in any one given year. So that's really what FEMA utilizes in terms of the glossary and the definitions in this document. That's really what is utilized.
Yeah, because it always concerns me that the use of that kind of term reduces the sense of urgency that people address this issue with, and it's upon us.
Yeah.
And we need to acknowledge that and not think it's something that won't happen in our lifetimes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we did last year. We had two storms. One storm that I believe was a 1% chance event, and another that came very close to that.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much for all your work, and thank you, staff, too. We appreciate the hard work on this document.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Item number 8. Request authorization to enter into a 7-year lease with Eco Beauty Hair Salon for use of the first floor office space at the China Trade Building located at 2 Boylston Street. It says Dennis, and I thought that would have been, but
no,
Lauren?
Yes, you got me again
Lauren.
today, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Polymaths. I'm here to request that Eco Beauty Salon be given a 7-year lease. Eco Beauty is a minority, woman-owned business which has been providing services to the Chinatown community from Suite 101 in the China Trade Building since 2003. Tammy Wong, owner of Eco, is proud of the community relationships she is able to maintain through her location in the China Trade Building. The prior lease with Eco expired in 2017, and the BPDA agreed to permit Eco to remain as a tenant at will pending the outcome of our efforts to reposition the building. The proposed new lease will be for Suite 101 without the additional hallway storage rooms which Tammy had before, reducing the size of the former leased premises from 1,405 to 790 square feet in order to accommodate the increased storage demand for the building since its return to full occupancy. The new lease will commence on October 1st, 2019. Eco's per square foot rent will increase from $23.65 per square foot to $31.28 per square foot, and will increase by $1 per square foot annually through the duration of the 7 years of the lease. Since the overall square footage of the space is decreased, the effective rent will remain constant for the first year of the new lease. These rates are consistent with the market rates for the retail space in Boston's Midtown subdistrict, when considering that the BPDA has not contributed financially to Eco's initial tenant build-out and no real estate commission will be paid. It's staff's recommendation that the BPDA enter into a new 7-year lease for an agreement with Eco Beauty for 790 square feet, Suite 101 at 2 Boylston Street, the China Trade Building.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 9, request authorization to enter into a 3-month lease agreement with the Suffolk Construction Company, Inc. for the use of the first floor office space at the China Trade Building located at 2 Boylston Street. Lauren.
Beginning April 1st, 2017, Suffolk Construction has occupied suite number 110 in the China Trade Building. The space was in severe disrepair at the time of the initial agreement, and Suffolk took the space in as-is condition at $7,000 a month. The original 18-month agreement included a 12-month option to extend, which was exercised, increasing the rent to $7,500 per month. The current agreement ends September 30th, 2019. Suffolk Construction is close to completing projects at nearby Emerson College and have requested an extension to stay through January 31st, 2020, with the option to, with 60 days notice, extend the termination date by an additional 3 months to April 30th, 2020. Suffolk Construction has agreed to pay $8,000 for the initial extension through January 2020, approximately $38.50 per square foot. If the 3-month extension is exercised, the agreed upon rent will increase to $8,500 a month, or $48.80 per square foot. These rates are also consistent with market rates for Class B office space in Boston's Midtown submarket.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 10, request authorization to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the City of Boston Department of Public Works for the use of fuel and services provided by the Fleet Maintenance Unit. John.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Very similar to my previous presentation, this is for the Boston Redevelopment Authority Fleet Maintenance to sign a memorandum of agreement to continue our relationship with them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Item number 11, request authorization to assign 2 license agreements from Nolan Associates LLC to Entertainment Cruises, Inc. for the continued use of a portion of Long Wharf for the operation of Boston Harbor Cruises. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Owned by the Nolan family, Boston Harbor Cruises has been a fixture in Boston Harbor for almost a century. Founded in 1926 and currently in its 4th generation, Boston Harbor Cruises has been a tenant of BPDA since 1967. They provide services including ferry services to Provincetown, Salem, the Harbor Islands, as well as whale watchers, MBTA commuter routes, and of course the now famous Codzilla. The Nolans have decided to move on from the family business and have entered into an asset purchase agreement with Entertainment Cruises. Entertainment Cruises will purchase the vessels, brand name, and trademark of Boston Harbor Cruises. Headquartered in Chicago, Entertainment Cruises was founded in 1978. They own and operate 60 vessels in 20 markets, including Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, Baltimore, Niagara Falls, and pending your approval, Boston. There'll be no obvious change to the casual observer. It'll look like Boston Harbor Cruises business as usual. I'm happy to report that Allison Nolan, who's been our principal contact at Boston Harbor Cruises for the past several years, will remain on as general manager for at least 1 year, so the transition should be very seamless. We're requesting permission to assign 2 separate licenses at Long Wharf from Boston Harbor Cruises to Entertainment Cruises. The leases, licenses, I should say, combined will provide BPDA with $640,000 in 2020.
Are there any questions on the board?
These the same folks who run the river cruises in Chicago?
Entertainment Cruises, yes, it is.
I'm curious, when we do something like this, do we do a sort of a background check or gather information on this company we're transferring this license to? And I'm thinking about if they're the type of company that pays a decent wage, a living wage. Do we look at those things?
I do not know about the wage. We can confirm that. We have done extensive internet research on Entertainment Cruises. They provided us with their confidential financial information, their last audited financial statements, which our colleagues over in the finance department have reviewed along with us. And plus the cash flow of the I tend to focus more on whether they can pay the rent or not, to be honest.
Right. I mean, we do our due diligence, and we look at, like I say, the financials, make sure they're prepared to run this company and their experiences. But I'm just curious about their experiences with the public, with the experiences with living wages, with their experiences with treatment with women and minorities and things like that, when they may be subcontracting. Do we look at that type of a background check with these companies? You don't I don't mean to be putting you on the spot, but I think that's important to consider.
With your permission, I'd like to introduce Allison Nolan and and see if Allison could answer some of those questions for you.
Yeah,
I didn't know
Mr.
you were
Chairman,
here,
Board.
Alice.
I was here. I snuck in, yeah. So one of the things, of course, this has been a four-generation family business for us. So the most important thing when we even contemplated whether or not we were going to sell our interest in Boston Harbor Cruises was the people that worked there, if they would be cared about and cared for the way that we have as a family. So one of the things that we're really excited about, or we feel good about, is that not only will I stay on as general manager for a year, Entertainment Cruises really wants me to stay on permanently in my current position, but we're going to transfer each and every single employee that's at Boston Harbor Cruises currently to Entertainment Cruises. So when Dennis said to the general public this is going to be a seamless transition, it really is. The same faces that sell your tickets, take your tickets, and run the boat will be there the day before closing and the day after. So there'll be no change in base rates, benefits, or the environment or standards in which people work in from the transition from one to the other.
Well, I appreciate your comments, but I'm thinking about in other venues where they're working now and the history that they have. I mean, I believe what you're saying, and it sounds great, but, you know, what's the pass on this? Like it would, I don't want to say background check, but just to think, we need to think of those things as an agency, you know, in addition to the due diligence, the financials, but to extend it a little bit more, maybe cast a wider net. But I'm happy for you, and I've taken some of those boat cruises, and you people run a great, your family runs a really great, I was going to say top shape, ship shape operation, I guess. Ship shape. And thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's sad. I don't want to get personal, but why are you leaving? I mean, what? It's such a, it's a great run. You know, it's such a big part of Boston. You don't have to answer that. It's just.
Yeah, difficult decisions, but we're all happy. You know, the company's in great shape. It's not a distressed sale or anything like that. So we're excited about the future. We're glad they're keeping the entire team. We're glad they're keeping the name. So we're excited to see it grow and the city grow around it.
But you almost have 100 years of service to the city like that. So it's sad to see institutions like that move on, and then we get some corporation come in, I guess, you know. It's not the same. But well, good luck to you.
We're going to make it feel the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you and your family.
That's great, and
Thank you.
I want to echo that, and thank you. I take the ferry every weekend to Provincetown, and I'm really happy to hear about the that all of the employees are going to be taken care of. So thank you for.
Yeah, you'll see Donald and the rest of the crew.
Yeah, my comment on the company is a great company. You took me to work every day to and from for 5 years when I worked over Deer Island. And you get great workers, and I took it from Rose Wharf, and all the different boats. Great people.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. It's an emotional thing, and now getting a little more emotional. So thank you very much. I'll tell my family.
Okay. Well, good luck. We're glad you chimed in tonight. That's good.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. So maybe we shouldn't allow this sale to go through. Okay, so if there's no further questions or comments, a motion is in order.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? No, the ayes have it. Thank you. And good luck, and best of luck to you and your family, too. Okay. Item number 12. Request authorization to amend the ground lease with CVPA Chain Forge LLC as tenant and redeveloper of Building 105, also known as the Chain Forge Building, located on a portion of Parcel NY-1 in the historic monument area of the Charlestown Navy Yard, to allow additional time to close on construction and opportunity zone equity financing, and to obtain building and other permits approvals. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In December 2017, BPDA and CVPA Chain Forge LLC executed a ground lease for development of the Chain Forge building into a 230-room hotel. Under the terms and conditions of the lease, the tenant would be in default of the lease in the event that they did not obtain both building permits and financing by a date certain. In July of this year, the board authorized an extension of time to complete financing and obtain building permits to September 30th, 2019. One critical financing issue remains for resolution. The developer is opting for utilization of a new federal opportunity zone program as a mechanism to access equity as opposed to conventional financing. In July, the developer agreed to pay, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. They're in the final stages of negotiation with two investors to utilize the opportunity zone funding program. Generally speaking, the opportunity zone program allows investors to reinvest capital gains from other projects that were sold from other properties and invest them into the opportunity zone to defer capital gains, similar to a 1031 tax deferred exchange. We also plan to return to the board by the end of this year to request ratification of the final lease terms and conditions. In July, I spoke of the frustration that this financing delay continues to require for all of us, including the developer, and that we keep coming back to request an extension. In July, the developer agreed to pay to BPDA a $95,000 non-refundable fee to show both good faith and evidence that these extension requests are not being taken for granted. I also promised that in the event we return to ask for another extension, which I'm here today to do, an even higher fee would be required as an incentive to close this transaction. You'll see in the board memorandum that the developers agreed to pay an additional $250,000 for this request. This requested 60-day extension. This will all be incorporated into the terms and conditions of the first ground lease amendment. Accordingly, I'm requesting permission to amend the lease to extend the deadline for both final financing and final building permits to November 30th, 2019.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order? Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Dennis. Item number 13, request authorization to consent to the assignment of lease for building number 33 in the Charlestown Navy Yard from 33 Navy Yard LLC to Cerrone Navy Yard LLC and issue an estoppel. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Building number 33 is a 47-unit apartment building located on 3rd Avenue in the Charlestown Navy Yard. BPDA leases the building to an entity, 33 Navy Yard LLC, who has held the lease since 2016. Another entity, Cerrone Navy Yard LLC, has agreed to purchase the lease from 33 Navy Yard LLC. Cerrone is a wholly owned subsidiary of Multifamily Acquisition Advisors, who are a real estate investment and consulting firm located in Dallas, Texas. They own over 20 multifamily developments in several states, including Texas, Indiana, Tennessee, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and building number 33 would represent their second property in Massachusetts. A condition of the lease requires that BPDA receive 15% of any net sale proceeds as a condition of approving the assignment. The exact amount is being finalized, but staff expects to receive between $250,000 and $300,000 as a condition of the sale. Cerrone has not requested a lease amendment, but as a condition of the purchase. But with only 47 years remaining on the lease, we anticipate that Cerrone will be requesting to negotiate a lease amendment to extend the lease. We anticipate returning to the board sometime in 2020 to speak to that. We're now requesting that the board approve the lease assignment to Cerrone Navy Yard LLC.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Will this sale affect or change in the lease affect the tenants? And are there any affordable units in this building that will be affected?
It will not. The Cerrone has agreed to keep all the existing tenants are staying. There will not be any. They're not seeking any reduction in the amount of affordable units or anything of that nature. So.
add one thing. I'm just Devon Quirk, Director of Real Estate, and just cognizant of the fact that the board only gets to see the proposals that we bring to you for approval. We had several discussions with previous buyers or potential buyers of this property who had proposed a conversion to condo, and we did not look upon those favorably because that would result in the eviction of the current rental tenants, and thus the buyer that's come forward and sort of meets our standards for preventing displacement and eviction of the existing people who live there today.
And do you know how much time is left on the affordable units in the building?
I'm not off the top of my head. I don't know if Dennis
Okay.
knows.
I'm sorry, Carol, can you repeat
How
the
much
question?
time is left on the affordable units in the building?
I do not know.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
Good. Okay, if there's no further questions, and a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much, Dennis. Item number 14. Request authorization to execute a contract with Nelson Naingard Consulting Associates, Inc. for transportation consultant services for the plan, South Boston Dorchester Avenue Transportation Plan, in an amount not to exceed $400,000. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Secretary Polymaths. You may recall that back in June, the board granted us permission to issue an RFP for this work, and we're here today to request authorization to enter into a contract with the recommended consultant team, which is led by Nelson Nygaard. Just a real quick recap. As you know, the plan, South Boston Dorchester Avenue, was approved by the board back in December of 2016. It really kind of articulates the community's vision for this area, which we know is going to experience some significant land use changes and growth going forward. It kind of focused on 4 areas: land use and open space, housing and economic development, placemaking and neighborhood character, and really the key, which is what this work's going to get into and a lot more in depth, is mobility and connectivity. A quick recap of the scope of this work, which I had presented back in June. This work is really going to take a much more in-depth look at the envisioned network that you see on the right there. On the left, in the kind of yellowed out version, is kind of the existing transportation network. And on the right is the envisioned sort of future multimodal network that we developed with the community through Plan South Boston Dorchester Avenue. This work is going to really get deep into analysis about this network, get real specific about what the needs are as far as capacity, lane capacities, what sort of transit improvements can really happen and when. It's really going to prioritize with growth when specific transportation improvements need to happen so that we can make sure that we're responding and we're implementing these improvements as the vision for this area starts to grow and change into the future. Again, as I said back in June, we were awarded permission to issue the RFP. We did that in mid-July. And then kind of early August, we received our deadline we received 3 proposals that met the minimum qualifications for the work. We formed a review committee that included both BPDA planning department staff members as well as Boston Transportation Department staff members. And the unanimous decision was to recommend the Nelson Nygaard consulting team with sub-consultants that include Tool Design Group and UTIL. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. What is the length of the
So we anticipate about a year, but I think we need to move as quickly as possible, but we gave ourselves an 18-month window just in case things get extended based on community process and the depth of the work.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further questions and a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 14. Sorry, that was item number 14. Item 15, request authorization to advertise and issue a request for proposals for the redevelopment of Building 108, located in a portion of Parcel NY-1 in the historic monument area of the Charlestown Navy Yard. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, Director Golden, and members of the board. We are requesting board approval to advertise and issue a request for proposals for BPDA-owned Building 108 in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Building 108 is a historical power plant located on a land parcel of approximately 40,000 square feet. The building was constructed in 1902 and served as the Navy Yard Central Power Plant until decommissioning in 1974. And you can see Building 108 is up at the north end of the Navy Yard, up here by the rope walk. Consistent with feedback received at the May 2019 community meeting, the RFP will seek residential, commercial, or retail uses. Building 108 is within the historic monument area of the Navy Yard, and redevelopment must be consistent with the applicable historic preservation standards. These include guidelines agreed to when the Navy Yard was transferred to the BRA in 1974, and the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. The building is in very poor condition, and the BPDA is currently engaging demolition engineering design services. After demolition is complete, the premises may carry an activity and use limitation, which restricts certain uses as a result of contaminants that are not able to be fully remediated. The RFP contains language describing these conditions to the potential respondents. We're excited to turn this blighted property into an asset to the Navy Yard community, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board?
So just to reaffirm, this building is coming down?
Yes.
I have a question. And the existing restrictions, can you just shed a little bit more light onto like what does that kind of
The historic restrictions?
Well, I thought you said there was some environmental situation.
So we are engaging in a $5 million demolition effort to demolish the building and also remediate the environmental contaminants that are there currently. The demolition process may uncover further contaminants we don't know about, but we have sort of set our course for demolition, and anything discovered beyond that is sort of the risk of the proponent.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, if there's no further questions on the motions in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 16, request authorization to allow the Economic Development and Industrial Corporation of Boston, on behalf of the Boston Redevelopment Authority, to advertise and issue a joint request for proposals for parking management services for Boston Redevelopment Authority and Economic Development Industrial Corporation of Boston parking facilities for 2-year terms with three one-year options. Megan.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. I'm back to ask your approval for the BRA portion of the parking management joint request for proposals. The scope of service and intended contract directly mirrors what was discussed in the EDIC presentation. The variance in contract amount between EDIC and BRA is due to the difference in the number and size of each entity's parking assets. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions on the board? Hearing none, the motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 17, request authorization to extend the tentative designation of Tenants Development Corporation as redeveloper of Parcel 22A, located at 151 Lennox Street in the South End Urban Renewal Area. Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. I'm requesting an additional 90-day extension to the tentative designation originally voted at the June 2018 board for Tenants Development Corporation of Roxbury. This tentative designation was extended for 90 days, as you may recall, at both the March and June 2019 boards. Tenants Development Corporation is proposing to develop an approximately 18,000 square foot, 4-story community center, including office space for its headquarters on BPDA-owned Parcel 22A at 151 Lennox Street in the South End Urban Renewal Area. Tenants Development Corporation continues to make significant progress on this project to date, as detailed in the board memo, and has developed solutions to situations encountered that are requiring more time and additional cost. I'm joined by Arnice Brown, who's of Tenants Development Corporation, and she can answer any questions you may have on the items they've been doing are some value engineering to bring down the size of the building, making it thus not as expensive. And they're also very engaged in their fundraising and anticipate their capital campaign getting a big jump start very shortly.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the board?
Is this parcel in an opportunity zone?
I don't believe so. Yeah, I don't believe it is.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further questions and a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 18, request authorization to extend the final designation of Catalyst Ventures Solidarity Enterprises, LLC, as redeveloper of parcel L43B, located at 41 Regent Street in the Washington Park Urban Renewal Area. Ray.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. In March, this board voted to extend final designation status for this redeveloper for parcel L43B in the Washington Park Urban Renewal Area located at 41 Regent Street in Roxbury. As you recall, the developer is proposing to combine this 3,224 square foot BPDA parcel with his adjacent 5,703 square foot parcel that's located at 64 Alpine Street. And they're proposing to build up to 14 homeownership units, including 2 income-restricted IDP units. The combined parcels create a site size of approximately 8,927 square feet. The BPDA understands that the adjacent parcel remains the subject of litigation pending in Suffolk Superior Civil Court. It is the further understanding of the BPDA that this litigation is still precluding issuance of a building permit for the site at this time. So we're requesting an additional 6 months extension of the final designation through March 31st, 2020 to allow further time for resolution of the legal matter.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item
Thank
number
you.
19. Request authorization to extend the tentative designation of 288 Tremont Street Partners, LLC, for the long-term lease and redevelopment of parcel P-12C, located at 290 Tremont Street in the South Cove Urban Renewal Area in the Midtown Cultural District. Ray.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, and members of the board. I'm here to ask you to please vote to extend the tentative designation of 288 Tremont Street Partners, LLC, for the redevelopment of parcel P12C, which is again located at 290 Tremont Street in the Chinatown Midtown cultural section of the city in the South Cove Urban Renewal Area. This approximately 29,000 square foot BPDA-owned site has been operated as a parking lot by private parking operators, currently ABM, on behalf of the BPDA for a number of years. 288 Tremont Street Partners, LLC, is a collaborative entity which consists of the Asian Community Development Corporation, Corcoran Jennison Companies, and they're the owner of the adjacent Doubletree Hotel, which is located to the south of the site, Millennium Boston, and Tufts Shared Services, Inc., and they're the owners of the parking garage that's located to the north of the site. As you may recall, 288 Tremont Partners submitted the sole proposal in response to the BPDA's request for proposals, which was due on January 10th of 2018. And this RFP sought a mixed-use development which included income-restricted rental and homeownership units, market-rate rental and homeownership units, parking, commercial space, and possible community space. So 288 Tremont Partners is proposing to construct an approximately 350-foot tall building of approximately 339 square feet, and it will feature approximately 152 affordable rental and homeownership units. It's entirely affordable units. Approximately 264 parking spaces, representing an expansion of the adjacent Tufts parking garage that requires no new curb cut, and also expansion of the hotel, as well as community space on the ground level. Also included is a pedestrian connection and community courtyard running through the development to provide activation and mid-block porosity. The project's affordable housing affordable homeownership units represent Millennium's off-site inclusionary development units from their currently under construction Winthrop Square project. Since receiving their tentative designation last December, the team has been engaged in the following: site due diligence, including conducting site surveys and currently completing its environmental assessment of the parcel. In addition, they've been engaged on an ongoing basis in refining the schematic designs for the project. They've also been working on the feasibility of having a branch library as the community space on the first floor. They've developed a shell and core design that's anticipated to be able to accommodate a branch library. And this design was the genesis of several meetings spanning the spring and summer of 2019, particularly concerning the proposed floor plan of the community space. Also, they've been engaged in pre-file meetings. BPDA Development Review has facilitated 4 pre-file meetings with the proponents, its consultants, the Department of Public Works, and the Boston Transportation Department in order to front-load much of the required project analysis and critiques in an effort to refine the project in advance of anticipated February 2020 affordable housing competitive state financing rounds. They've also filed their letter of intent. They did this on July 16th of 2019, and an impact advisory group has been formed with the assistance of the city and state elected officials and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services. So this extension is required in order to continue next steps for the project, which are as follows. The proponent plans to file an expanded project notification form in October, at which time the Article 80 large project review process will begin. The BPDA plans to host several public and IAG meetings to facilitate the review of the project over the course of the fall and into the winter. Once the Article 80 project review is complete, the developer is expected to apply for state and federal affordable housing subsidies early in the winter of 2020. Therefore, staff recommends that the board approve this extension in order to allow the project to continue moving forward as described. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the board?
Do we have preliminary renderings of this?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we had presented them at some earlier meetings.
Okay, if there's no further questions, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Item number 20, this is Article 80 Development Not Open to Public Testimony. This is item number 20 in East Boston. Request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80, Section 80E-6 of the Zoning Code, in connection with the changes made to the previously approved 319 through 327 Chelsea Street project for the proposed construction of 38 rental residential units, including 6 IDP units, 1 commercial retail unit, 42 parking spaces, and bicycle spaces, located at 319 through 327 Chelsea Street, and to change the ownership to Chelsea Bremen LLC, and to take all related actions. Raul.
Good afternoon, Chairman Burke, Director Gold. Oh, he's not there. Madam Secretary, members of the board. The project before you this evening is the 319-327 Chelsea Street project in East Boston, which was approved originally by this board in December of 2013. Since that time, Chelsea Bremen LLC, an affiliate of MG2 Group, acquired the property and development rights to the project from Pat Bonapani, who was acting on behalf of 325 Chelsea Street Realty LLC. The current owner would now like to proceed with the construction of the previously approved project. In order to finalize the Article 80 process, we're requesting your authorization to enter into the necessary Article 80 agreements with the new owner. The size and scope of the project remains largely unchanged from what was previously approved, aside from some minor design adjustments that were made pursuant to the design review process associated with the original approval. I'm joined by Richard Lins, as counsel for the development team, should you have any questions or if you'd like any additional information.
Okay, thank you, Raul. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. Has this property just been sitting empty for 6 years? Is that what's been happening? Sitting inactive and empty?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary. To answer your question, no, it's been operating as McGrath Funeral Home since it's gone through the process and since it was approved. The reason for the delay, in large part, was to relocate the McGrath Funeral Home. That was a project that was approved by the zoning board a few years back. It just completed construction, and they're ready to move across the street. Now that they're ready to move, we're ready to proceed with this project at their site.
And can you go over the community benefits that are involved with this sale?
Sure. I believe they're highlighted in the board memorandum, but I can speak to them for the record. In addition to new pedestrian and commercial activity along Chelsea and Bremen Street, we are proposing one commercial space that would activate that section of Bremen Street. It's mostly residential. That was something we understood was requested through the early part of this community process when the project was originally approved. There's a total of 6 IDP units that are being proposed in connection with this project, in addition to enhancement of public realm, including the sidewalk and streetscapes in the immediate area as well.
Are you going to be offering the commercial space at a below market rate?
I don't believe that that was in the original approval. I believe that this would be offered at market.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, and a motion is in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Have a good evening.
Item number 21. Request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80, Section 80E-6 of the zoning code for the construction of 16 residential condominium units, including 2 IDP units, 14 parking spaces and bicycle spaces located at 11 Taft Hill Terrace, and to recommend approval to the Board of Appeal for the necessary zoning relief and to take all related actions. Ebony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Madam Secretary. The project before you was located at 11 Taft Hill Terrace in the Roslindale neighborhood. The project is a 4-story and approximately 25,952 square foot building. The project will create approximately 16 new condominium units, ranging from 1-bedroom to 2-bedroom units. In addition, the project will also contain 14 parking spaces and 16 bicycle parking spaces. The project site is transit-oriented and located within walking distance to the Roslindale Village commuter rail station, as well as several bus lines to and from the Forest Hills Orange Line station. The project was filed on June 13th, 2019, and the public comment period ran until July 31st. A public meeting was held on July 24th, 2019, and during the public comment period, there was one abutter that had some concerns, but the development team met with him this week and resolved all the issues. At this time, I will turn it over to the development team to go over the presentation in more detail, and after that, we will gladly take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, members of the board. Jay Walsh on behalf of Owen Barry of CPAC Development, LLC. As Ebony mentioned, we did engage our Roslindale community very early on in the process prior to filing. We were very enthusiastically welcomed by folks. As you'll see, the site sits directly adjacent to Roslindale Village Shopping District, as well as the Roslindale Village MBTA station. We worked with Roslindale Village Main Streets, our abutters, and our neighbors on Taft Hill Terrace and Taft Hill Park, in addition to Walk Up Roslindale, who has done tremendous work in doing some advocacy for better pedestrian connections and public transit in the Roslindale neighborhood. We feel that this is an ideal site for housing that would be a huge improvement to the neighborhood. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Arndt from Zephyr Architects, who will go over the plans.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, thank you very much. So as previously stated, the property is located in Roslindale Square, just off the square at the lower end of the slide on Taft Hill Terrace. The property is located very centrally to a lot of mass transit. The current site is occupied by a 6-family residential building that we are proposing to tear down. That is in the top 2 slides. The views on the right and the bottom are views from the square and to the property. You can see it's currently occupied by the gabled building. The site is just under 10,000 square feet. We are proposing that we will have a garage entrance on the right. This will serve 14 parking spaces, 16 bicycles. In addition to, we'll have the primary entrance off the Taft Hill Terrace and a roll-in unit also off Taft Hill Terrace. We include 2 affordable units mixed throughout the plan. Additionally, as part of the conversation, we are including PVC panels to power the house elements, basically common space, lobbies, garage elements. Couple elevations. Far left is the front elevation from Taft Hill Terrace. The one on the right is the south-facing elevation, and then we have the rear on the left and the west the north-facing on the right here. This is a perspective coming from Taft Hill Tariff. This would be the main entrance with the public entrance on the left, the parking on the right along the side against the adjacent building. And let's see. This is a number of renderings from the park, Adams Park at Rosendale Square. And if anybody has any questions, I'll answer.
Great. That concludes your presentation? Good. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? Motion's in order.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Item number 22 in Hyde Park. Request authorization to issue a scoping determination waiving further review pursuant to Article 80, Section 80B-5.3D of the zoning code for the construction of 247 rental residential units, including 32 IDP units, in two buildings, the Sprague Building consisting of 100 residential units with fitness and gym space, and the Courtyard Building consisting of 147 residential units with a coffee shop, sports bar, and daycare, located at 36 to 40 Sprague Street, and to take all related actions. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, Madam Secretary. The project consists of approximately 352,445 gross square feet of development, including 247 rental units and parking for 251 vehicles. The project will contain two buildings, one called the Sprague Street Building and the other called the Courtyard Building. The unit mix consists of 44 studios, 107 one-bedrooms, 88 two-bedrooms, and 8 three-bedrooms. Staff is recommending that the board take the following actions: authorize the director to issue a scope and determination waiving further review, issue a certification of compliance, execute and deliver a cooperation agreement, an affordable rental housing agreement and restriction, and any and other agreements. In this presentation, you'll first hear from John Polgini, the project's counsel, and then you'll hear from Steve Shelter, the project architect, who'll give you a brief overview.
Thanks, Lance. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, members of the board. John Polgini on behalf of the development team. With me tonight, we have Jordan Warshaw, who is the owner-developer, Steve Shetler, who is the architect on the project, together with Sujit Satol. This property is 4 acres of land that is located on the Hyde Park-Dedham border. Its unique property is it's surrounded by rail yards as well as commercial industrial to one side. And most importantly, it is directly adjacent to the Reedville station, making this site the perfect location for this type of density due to the transit basis. This project went through a lengthy community process which began back in 2015. We had over 50 meetings with individuals and community groups to vet this project. And through that community process, the true community process, this project went from 521 units to the 247 units proposal that is before you today. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Steve Shelter. He will walk you guys through the design and presentation, and we're here to answer any questions. But again, thank you for having us here this evening. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I also submitted a letter this afternoon that came from Council McCarthy's office, overwhelmingly supporting the project.
Okay. Thank you, Lance.
Mr. Chairman of the board, the project site is described by John. Here we go. We're already having technical difficulties. On this plan of the illustrative plan of the site, you can see the two buildings, the Sprague Street building along Sprague Street to the west of the site, with the Reedville station to the north to the right. And then what's known as the Courtyard building, 147 units. Each of the buildings is 5 stories in height. One of the unique aspects of this project is that all of the parking for the residents is underneath this courtyard, this landscape courtyard. which is about 20 feet below the height of land of Sprague Street. So the Sprague Street building actually renders only about 2.5 stories along Sprague Street. There are two major access points to the site. One is a large staircase landscaped element here designed to provide direct access to the Reedville commuter rail station to the north, and the other is a vehicular access and service access to the project located here for car drop-off. This is a rendering of the car drop-off area, and here this is the south elevation facing the industrial abutters to the south. From that drop-off, vehicular drop-off in handicap parking area, there is a large staircase which connects directly up to that courtyard, 18 feet up. And this is the view from the top of the staircase looking down at the project, so you can see the height of the buildings as they render on Sprague Street, and the courtyard building to the west. To the east, excuse me. And then this is a view looking north to the courtyard, which is anchored by retail elements and a work share element to the north. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this isn't a public hearing or anything, but there is a state elected official here. The state representative, did you want to say anything?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, why don't you use this opportunity to...
Mr. Chairman, I truly want to thank you for allowing me to speak today. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve the constituents of Reedville in my 46 years as a state representative. No other issue comes to mind where a community has spoken almost unanimously. A door-to-door survey was done. 89% of the people from Reedville, and this issue is strictly a Reedville issue, 89% of the people in Reedville said no to this project. 2% said yes, and 9% for one reason or another wanted some further information. There were a lot of public meetings, but there were two in particular. The first meeting was over 500 people. And at that meeting, it was almost unanimous again against this project. The second large meeting of 350 people, again, was almost unanimous, except we had some folks who came from the outside and wanted this project built. And most of those folks, Mr. Monahan, were labor people. And I can understand why they wanted to come to Reedville and express their views. There's a principle by the people and for the people. It's embedded in our public system of government. And I have been told repeatedly that the people of Reedville would make this decision. And I can't express it any more than they did through public surveys and from door-to-door surveys and coming to public meetings again and again. Now, there are reasons, Mr. Speaker, excuse me, Mr. Burke, Mr. Chairman, there are reasons that the folk in Reedville are opposed to this. Now, I don't know if any of you know where Reedville is. but it's on the southern tip of the city. And if you try to come through Reedville, because we have a series of bridges underneath our railroads, 2 commuter rails and one that carries freight. And because of that, it kind of separates Reedville into 2. But these 2 and if I may, with the permission of the board, I'm not here to discuss just the 247 apartments that is being proposed to you today, because they have left out the largest part of this development, which they are going to come back at a later date so that they will have about 520 apartments in total. There's only one way in, and there's only one way out. In less than a couple of months, this board will entertain another housing project in Reedville, less than 2 acres, 325 units. They're 2/10 of a mile from each other. And as I said, the traffic, if you came through Reedville between the hours of 6:30 to 11:30 in the morning, 2 to 7 p.m. at night, you can't get through. And these 2 are right at the tip of these bridges. It's going to clog the traffic even further. Now, I know the city of Boston has a huge traffic problem, but this is exacerbated tremendously. And if these, and if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, because I'll make my spiel this time and you can listen to it 2 months later, because I'll say the same thing again. When the next proposal comes, and it will come to this chamber in a couple of months, there'll be 850 units of housing in these 2 developments, which is almost twice as big as Reedville as a whole. It's almost the Manhattanization of a community that had single 2-family, 3-family dwellings throughout the district. It's going to change the character of the neighborhood. But this, at the bridges, is going to be worse of a bottleneck because of these 2 developments. And again, I stress the fact that before you today is 247 apartments. In the very near future, these folks are coming back with the larger majority of their land to build more. And I think if they're honest, they'll tell you that. I think they'll tell you that that's what they're going to do. One other thing I'd like to get out is that I think they don't own all of the land. And if I were this board, I would check seriously as to some of the land that they present as going to be builded on and that they own. And I don't think so. I think it was a former city street that somehow the owner has taken over, and certainly not by eminent domain, but has been taken over. So I leave you with this, Mr. Chairman, and again, I thank you so much for allowing me to speak. Communities are made up of people, and vice versa, people make up communities. And when people say, as they have in this issue, dramatically, overwhelmingly, that they don't want this project, I would suggest, and I would hope, that this board would entertain the people of Reedville versus the developer. any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions at all.
I'll handle that. But thank you for coming tonight. We do appreciate your comments, and we do always allow the elected officials from the impacted neighborhoods an opportunity to speak. So thank you for that.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay, so are there any questions from the board? Or any comments?
I know we don't have, this is not a hearing, but I would like to hear some response.
Yeah.
What was just said.
Yeah. Would you like to sort of respond to some of the points in the state rep?
I would.
And let us know.
To my good friend Angela Scascia, who I've known for most of my adult life and a very long time. First of all, I think the big concern there was where this project had gone through the community process. It went from 521 units to 247 units. There was a parcel of land that initially we had under agreement, and that was where the reference came of the 521 units. That option had expired, and the seller would not renew it. So the concern, which was raised probably 7 or 8 times during that presentation, about this 521 units coming forward, that is not the case. That is no longer on the table. It is gone. The proposal of the 247, so if we're honest with you, which was what asked of us, I'm honestly telling you that that parcel of land that was part of the initial proposal of 521 is no longer on the table. It is off the table. We went through a very spirited community process. We had 2 major meetings, and I agree with the representative. The first major meeting, there were 500 people in the room. If not, it was 1,000 degrees. It was packed. And I would say the majority of the people were opposed. But at the same time, a lot of the people were intimidated because there were some of the people who were very loud and yelled and shouted down people and yelled at them when they would speak in support of the project. There was a subsequent meeting, there was more order, and there were many more people who supported it at that meeting. So the proposal before you today started in 2015, went through a very spirited, lengthy community process, and the big concern of 800 units coming down the road because in other proposals on the Father Hart Bridge is not true, because this proposal of 247 is the end of the road for this project.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Are there any other questions from the board or any other comments?
I have a question. Can you speak a little bit to the results of any traffic impact studies that you did as a part of preparing for this?
Sure. Well, I mean, I could speak firsthand of traffic, but maybe somebody on the team could address that. Reedville, and the representative knows this very well, we have become a transportation destination for what we have in Reedville is we have Amazon. We have more buses than you could possibly imagine. We have commercial industrial trucks that are going over those small bridges that the representative referenced, and that is causing the traffic. The traffic in Hyde Park right now is not caused by development. There is no development. There has been one Article 80 project that has been approved, that has been constructed from the ground up, which was from the Southwest Boston CDC, a small project down by Fairmount train station. There has been no development. Those of you who are familiar with Hyde Park know that. You sit on this board. There have been very few Article 80 projects that have come before you. But with respect to the traffic studies, do you guys want to, do you want to address that, Jordan?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, members of the board. Jordan Warshaw with the development team. We've done extensive traffic studies. The project is entirely residential, as was presented to you. Of course, there is traffic generated by residential. There will be traffic generated by residential anywhere in the city that you place it. Our goal has been to create a transit-oriented development, which is why it is located directly next to the train station, which is why the primary entrance of it exits to the bridge to the train station, which is why we've got an extensive, the largest work share that's ever been built in a project of this size on site to encourage people to work from home. It's really the first project of its type that really incorporates a WeWork type space as the primary amenity of the project. to encourage people not to commute by car. And as the state representative alluded to, this is not the easiest place to commute by car from. If you want to commute to Boston, you don't live here. But you can commute by train in 20 minutes and be in town, and that's why we are oriented to the train station. As far as vehicular demand from residential, back when we had the 521 units, and just to correct one other point, the other site we don't own any longer, and originally on this site we had 390 units, and there are now only 247 on this site. So 140 units have been chopped off this site alone. The cars per minute generated, even at 521 units, were a couple of cars per minute total, and then dispersed in the various directions that they come from, it relates to fewer than a car a minute in any direction during the worst peak hour. Now, with half the number of units, it's half the number of cars.
Okay, thank you.
Could someone from the BPDA put this project in context around, is there a plan in Reedville? What is our overall plan? What is our overall transportation plan? You know, for the neighborhood, because we all know development is increasing in all our neighborhoods, so can we put this
Just need one more
project in perspective?
I don't have it print. There you go.
Okay, so Lauren Shurtleff, Interim Director of Planning. What we have that's, again, I don't have it printed here, so it's a little hard to see, but we do have a shot of the context from Imagine Boston 2030, in which this area was identified as an expanded neighborhood. And so, you know, from the perspective of there being access by transit to downtown and there being sites like this, we do think it's appropriate for some density.
Are we doing any kind of transportation planning, given that there's going to be more density here?
I wouldn't necessarily say that we're like actively running, like for instance in Alston Brighton, where we're seeing a ton of development pressure. We're doing a mobility study there. We're not doing that out here because there's less parcels, and we're not seeing the same sort of pressure at this point. Obviously, in the future, if that were to change, we could also do something.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Both.
Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Item number 23, request authorization to issue a certification of approval pursuant to Article 80, Section 80E6 of the zoning code for the construction of 23 rental residential units, including 15 income-restricted units, 9 off-street parking spaces located at 273 Highland Street, and to take all related actions. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, and Director Golden. My name is Stephen Harvey, and I'm a project manager at the BPDA, and I want to thank you for your time today. The project I bring before you is E+ Highland, formal street address 273 Highland Street. The project site is located in the historic Fort Hill district of Roxbury, nestled between Highland Park and Marcella Playground. The site is a short walking distance to the Jackson Square T-stop. The project is a 4-story building totaling 28,593 square feet. It will contain 23 mixed income units with 19 off-street parking spaces. 15 of the 23 units will be affordable units. An accumulation of 7 D&D, Department of Neighborhood Development parcels. The project we will see today came about through collaboration between neighborhood stakeholders, the Highland Park PRC, the Department of Neighborhood Development, and the Boston Planning and Development Agency, along with the affordability aspect, which goes broader and deeper than required. The project will also be a very energy efficient building, exceeding the requirements of the D&D RFP. John Dazell, a senior architect from our Climate Change and Environmental Planning Department, will elaborate on this shortly. But in closing, we successfully held our required and publicly advertised BPDA public meeting on August 13th at the Urban Edge in Roxbury, and the community was very excited to see this project come to reality. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you, Stephen. Any questions from, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Golden, Secretary Polymaths. 273 Highland is the latest addition to our E+ Green Building program. Just as a reminder, E+ buildings are LEED Platinum, so they're very green, and they're energy positive. They'll surplus electricity back to the grid on an annual basis. The E+ program is a leading response to the Mayor Walsh's Carbon Neutral Boston 2050 program and is transforming building practices in Boston and in the region, demonstrating that we can in fact build better buildings that address our climate change challenges. To date, we've completed 10 units of E+ housing in Boston. We have another 4 in active construction right now, and we have another 60 in pre-construction planning. This and several others are in the works, and we look forward to building more as time allows. I'll turn this over to the development team to explain more about the project. Okay. I should end that upon completion, this will be the largest energy positive building in Boston and probably in the region.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, John. My name is John Rudzinski, Reese Larkin Development, the proponent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. We'll be very, very brief. Even more brief than, here we go. Yeah, we're going to skip all this because it's already been said so eloquently by Stephen Harvey. I want to go to this. This is the crux of what we're doing here. This is mixed income housing. The income mix and the entire conception of the project was a result of an extensive community planning process put on by the Department of Neighborhood Development. The department the city owns the 7 parcels. They're contiguous. They're vacant. Our proposals for 23 units with a wide range of affordability, which meets the differing needs of the neighborhood. 3 of the units will be extremely low-income families, below 30% AMI. 7 will be below 60% of AMI. So those 10 I would call deeply affordable. Another 5 will be below 100% AMI, and then we'll have 8 market rate units for the total of 23. You can see on the left, this is a family-oriented development with 4 3-bedrooms and primarily 2-bedroom units. I'm going to ask Gail Sullivan from the Studio G Architects to give a quick review of the design.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, and members of the board. Which way am I going? Yes. Okay. This shows the mix, and we have an FAR of 1.75. I couldn't hear if Stephen had said that. I'm going to quickly go through this. This is the site. It has been empty for a very long time. It's 7 parcels. I think that was mentioned. And a little bit on the context, in case you don't know it. Key about the context, there's a lot of great resources around. This is also a transit-oriented development site, which we're very excited about. And one thing about this site that the community asked for is to create connectivity from Jackson Square at the bottom of the hill, which we use public streets for, but there will be a path. You see in red there the site. There'll be a path that climbs Fort Hill up to Fort Hill Park, and that's one of the community benefits of the project. This shows the site, and then, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards here. Okay. Whoop. John talked a little bit about the E+ program. We are not only meeting the city's E+ requirements, so this will be energy positive housing, but we've targeted 2 things that go beyond those targets. One, we're targeting LEED Platinum, which goes beyond the Article 37 requirements, and the other is we intend to make this a passive house certified project. So it will be the first primarily affordable passive house in the Boston area and perhaps New England. I'm not going to go into the details, though we can answer questions. This just shows the strategies we're using to achieve those goals. This is the site plan. One of the key things that we've done, which we think is a community benefit, despite the fact that it's primarily affordable, is we put the parking below grade in a garage. We're taking advantage of the slope of the hill here. And then what that does is it allows us to really use the site for some outdoor space and the housing. You can see on the right-hand side, we have a small entry plaza and a gallery that is meant to be available for community activities, meetings, local artists. And this was something we had heard as a desire from the community. The floor plans, PVs covering the roof. The roof is larger than the building itself in order to get all the PVs we need. And then the elevations, but I'm going to go to what I think really describes the project better. This is a view from Center Street looking up Highland, and you can see right-hand side, probably 80-year-old apartment buildings are our existing context, so we really are fitting into the context and the scale of that part of the neighborhood. And here, looking towards Center Street, again, very different character. The mansard roof immediately adjacent. And then here's a view from the evening of the building. So decidedly modern, because this is a neighborhood full of many different architectural characters spanning all of the years of Roxbury. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. How are you able to achieve the deep affordability and the environmental E+ rating? Are you using public subsidies, or is this public land, or?
Yes, great question. Both. This will be deeply subsidized through the Department of, number one, through D&D, through their generosity, but also through the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. So this will be a mixed income, low-income housing tax credit development, and that'll provide the, I'd say, the biggest subsidy of all, both for the affordability and to some extent for the passive house.
Great, thank you.
Go right ahead, Mr. Moynihan.
I hear it a lot, and I'm an electrician by trade. Energy positive. Do you have the statistics on that?
So first I should say what it means if people don't know. This is not energy positive every day or every hour. This is energy positive over the course of a year. So there'll be times when the project in the daytime, and there aren't that many people there perhaps, is generating more energy than it's using. It's backfed to the grid. Then there are times, days, weeks, perhaps people think winter, but actually winter's good energy generation time. There'll be times when we're using more energy than we're generating. But the goal here, and we do quantify it, we measure it, we have an energy model that's been started. We are required to keep updating that energy model as we go forward with the development to be certain that we will achieve the goals. The minimum requirement of the City's E+ project is we must be on the positive side of that. And I joked about it, but it's true. One of the things that we did for a design decision is we enlarged the roof. So there are roof overhangs there in order to really maximize the number of PVs. We're also using high output PVs. So we'll be doing a whole lot of things. But here, a little thing. One of the reasons why we're doing passive house is it allows us to make the building super energy tight. So we will use as little power as possible, and all the systems are electric. There's no gas, there's no oil, there's no carbon.
Well, the electricity, the power plant that's
on site.
delivering the electricity.
Sorry, on site.
Is being powered by oil and coal.
That's right. That's right.
But
we can only control what's on site.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not the big the carbon footprint thing. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. How many solar panels are on the roof? Because I know the average is about 350 watts.
Okay, you caught me. I don't know the answer.
If I had none, I'd be in favor of the project. But when I see positive, energy positive, I just was curious, because I find that hard to believe.
Do you remember the, I'm forgetting it, and I don't have the statistics with me, the data with me, but.
Like I said, if that wasn't on there, I'd be in favor, but I was curious if you had the stats.
We do have, I just am not remembering right now.
Sure. Director, we're finding that with about 26 panels on a single residential unit, we can surplus a fair amount of energy back to the grid on an annual basis.
And is each panel about 350? Is that what you use?
They used to be. We're running more like 410 now.
410.
And we can get you the numbers. We also have a project right up the street, which is actually our first E+ project. The 4 units there annually surplus enough energy for a typical code-compliant, three-bedroom home. So we've proven the concept, and now we're scaling. This, at 4 stories, is actually a significant step up in scale.
The solar panels are productive. Are you using 6 hours a day?
It's all day long as the sun's shining on them, so it varies across the season.
It's about 6 hours a day annually is what a solar panel produces. So when I run the numbers, I just don't see how it's possible. Again, if it wasn't there, I'd be in favor of the project. I was just curious if you had the stats.
Sure. We can share a lot of the energy performance data with you from the existing projects. We track them pretty detailed.
And we'll provide John with the specific data on this project, and he can forward that to you.
Okay, if there's no further questions and a motion's in order.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, congratulations, and good luck. Item number 24, request authorization to adopt an order of taking for the air rights parcel at 10 Tabor Street in connection with the 10 Tabor Street project, and to petition the Public Improvement Commission for the vertical discontinuance of said air rights and to take all related actions. Raul.
Thank you, Chairman Burke, Director Golden, Madam Secretary, members of the board. On February 14, 2019, this board voted to approve the 10 Tabor Street project located at the corner of Warren and Tabor Street in the Dudley Square section of Roxbury. The project, as approved, consists of a 6-story mixed-use building with ground floor retail space, 10 off-street parking spaces, and 45 residential units. In order for this project to proceed with construction, the city requires the discontinuance and transfer of air rights in the public way above portions of the taking and discontinuance area around the project site. As such, staff is seeking your authorization for the BPDA to adopt a demonstration project plan under Chapter 121B of Mass General Laws, adopt an order of taking for air rights where applicable around the project site, and authorize a co-petition to the PIC for the taking and discontinuance area. Joined by Phil Resco, who's architect for the project, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Raul. Are there any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 24, personnel. Shaban.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Secretary, and Director Golden. This evening, we only have one BRA agenda item for your consideration, and that is a travel item, which is further details listed on the board memo, and the employee is Trin Nguyen from the Office of Workforce Development.
Okay, any questions from the board? Hearing none, a motion's in order?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 6, contractual. We need a motion to pay the outstanding bills.
I move we pay our outstanding bills.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And the final item of the evening is the director's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to inform you all that earlier in the summer, late spring, we received word from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau that our own Jill Oak-Zick, a senior landscape architect in our planning division, has been selected as an awardee of the Henry Lee Shattuck Award. So we'll be celebrating with Jill in October. I believe it's October 10th when the award ceremony occurs. We're thrilled for Jill. She's a wonderful colleague and friend to those who work with here at the agency, and just as importantly, one of the reasons the committee at the Municipal Research Bureau, after looking through a multitude of applicants, selected Jill for the award is she is the consummate professional. She has a wonderful disposition. She works beautifully with people internally and externally in an inclusive, cooperative fashion to protect the public realm. I mean, in short, her job is to make the world around new development beautiful, and she does a magnificent job at that. Her handiwork is all over the city, and we look forward to celebrating, and we thank the Municipal Research Bureau for selecting Jill Zick for this important and prestigious award. Again, for those who don't know, I think most people here and most people listening may know what the Shattuck Award is. It is the premier award for outstanding public service granted to people who serve the city of Boston in their government positions. So once again, we're thrilled for Jill. Yesterday or the day before, this week, the mayor and I and Trin Nguyen, our director of the Office of Workforce Development, headed out to Dudley Square, where we announced awardees for over $2.2 million in federal CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds, that are geared toward education and job training. So that $2.2 million was routed through our Office of Workforce Development, and more than 50 nonprofit service providers were selected for a piece of that funding. It is our assessment that over 4,000 low-income Bostonians will benefit from training programs that are administered by those 50-plus vendors. I believe it was 51 nonprofit vendors that will provide job training services. Once again, this is a success story with regard to the Office of Workforce Development's efforts to deliver resources where they're needed so that the people of Boston, especially those most vulnerable and lower income jobs, can improve their situation in life and achieve better incomes and better jobs through better training. So it's making sure that the positive, robust economy in the development world that we're currently experiencing is really serving people all along the socioeconomic spectrum. So we're thrilled to hand out those or announce those grants earlier this week in Dudley Square. And finally, a couple minutes before this board proceeding began late this afternoon, the mayor signed a home rule petition, a piece of legislation that came out of the Boston City Council, which does two fundamental things. It allows us greater flexibility with regard to the administration and use of linkage funds. Linkage funds are payments made on a per square foot basis for commercial property that's built in the city. Significant funding is generated by new commercial development for housing creation, affordable housing creation, and job training. So this legislation improves our ability to use that tool more flexibly. The home rule petition also codifies the inclusionary development policy. Again, that is the policy by which every market rate residential development in the city must build some units, minimum of 13%. Sometimes significantly higher, but must build affordable units in new market rate development. That, as a result of this, if accepted by the legislature, if approved by the legislature, this legislation will now codify that policy and ensure its security and its perpetuity well into the future. So it's a significant piece of legislation heading out of City Hall up to the state legislature. We're hopeful that we can secure legislative passage and be certain of our ability to tap these important tools for many, many years to come. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
All right, thank you much. Thank you very much. I need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.